Nice to meet you all. My name's Maeve. If I haven't met you all already, I can recognise a few faces in the audience. I'm a climate journalist, mainly for Channel 4 News. I also write for The Guardian and Forbes and do all sorts of things, always juggling. But I'm really, really excited to be here today to host this panel on literally my favourite topic to talk about. I bore people all the time talking about creativity, how we can be better, how we can better communicate climate, basically, so that it's not just all reports, it's not just all science, it's not just all jargon, it's creative and engaging and sexy, let's be honest. So, yeah, there are so many different climate mediums we can talk about. There's fiction, there's TV, there's films. We're going to go into all of them today with our panel. Journalism, which is what I work in, comedy, social media. But obviously, climate shocks are all around us right now. We can't forget that. And they're no longer kind of isolated events. There's a lot of interlinking parts to them that affect all of us. And I work in the news. It's very polarising, often, telling this story. So the question that we're going to be asking today is, who is helping to shape this conversation in a more different and an interesting, engaging way? So I would like to welcome my panel to the stage now. I will introduce them once they're up, but please give them a massive round of applause. Shout out for an all-women panel. This is great. Great, so who am I going to introduce first? In the middle, we have Stacey Roberts-Steele. So Stacey is the managing director at Yellow Dot Studios, and she's the co-producer of the blockbuster film Don't Look Up, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen. That's Stacey there in the middle. She's based in Los Angeles, where she works for Yellow Dot, as I said. And Yellow Dot, if you don't know them, are a non-profit media production company which use comedy and satire to fight climate disinformation and challenge corporate greed. So, Stacey. On my right, we have Lucy Stone. Lucy is the founder and executive director of Climate Spring. Climate Spring is a global organization which is shifting our cultural response to the climate crisis by transforming how it is represented in film, TV, and popular culture. On the end, we have Catherine Ellis. Catherine is the head of climate content at BAFTA's dedicated sustainability platform, Albert. Catherine has 2 decades of experience in storytelling and content creation. She was a senior TV producer for many years, across factual to entertainment for major UK and US broadcasters. So amazing, amazing panel that we've got here. I'm seriously really privileged to be on the stage with these women. So another round of applause. Yeah. Stacey, can we start with you?
Sure.
And Don't Look Up.
Yes.
Let's start there, because we're going to be talking about resilience today as kind of an overarching theme of where these stories can go and how we can tell them in a more in a different way, basically. Just tell us a little bit about how it started with Don't Look Up and what you ultimately think the effect was and how it changed the film landscape.
Yeah. I mean, it all started in the mind of Adam McKay, who's the writer-director behind it. And, honestly, he had been really moved by the IPCC report. This is what he does for fun. That came out, and really, I think in the moment he realized how much of a threat climate was, and he was trying to figure out a way in. And one day, he was actually directing a different television show, and he just was like, "I've got the idea. Comets headed for Earth. We're all gonna die." And he's like, "That's what it's gonna be." And he was like, "Great, I'm going to go write it." And I was like, "No, you have to stay and direct the rest of the show." But then he went off for 2 weeks, wrote the entire script. And after that, everything fell together pretty quickly because it was just a really good story, really interesting characters. And, we were able to get really big people to sign on to it. And had we not had a little thing called COVID hit in March of 2020, we would have made the movie from script to release in 1 year. But because of COVID, we had to bump a little bit. But it was actually better in some ways because we ended up filming basically through the fall into the new year, which was Trump was president, then Biden was elected, and then Biden became president, all while we were filming, which was really interesting. Yeah.
So do you think that the kind of political landscape played a part in the success of the film?
Yeah, I think it played also parts in changing the script of the film when we were filming, because once COVID hit, Adam looked at the script and was like, oh, there's so many things that are already happening that were in the script that would seem dated. And so we had to change a lot of things. But also it's interesting to look back at it now. It was released 5 years ago at this point, and certain things that, you think, oh, everything in the world has changed so much, and it absolutely has. But there's also things in the movie that are the same as right now. Like when Elon Musk was doing the whole Doge thing, when Trump first became president, and he was in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. Those are scenes from Don't Look Up when the tech billionaire Peter Ishmael is in the Situation Room making calls. And so, I think there's a lot of things that it speaks to then, but also even now, 5 years later.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. And Lucy, just, back to you now. So that's an example of a film that we all know that has a climate story kind of weaved into it, but it isn't really the point, is it? It's kind of the whole thing's a metaphor, basically. Yeah. An allegory of sorts. And in Lucy, your work with Climate Spring, you help to commission and to fund storytelling in climate and environmental themes, whether they're obvious or they're more implicit. What do you look for when you're deciding, what stories to commission?
I mean, I can tell you what we don't look for, first of all. It can't be really depressing. Can't be really obvious. We're trying to avoid all the stereotypes and all the cliches. I mean, really what we're looking for is stories that give some answers and a sense of where we could be heading. And that doesn't have to be hope everything's going to be fine, but we know that, where we are in the climate crisis at the moment, everybody fundamentally gets there's a problem. They're experiencing it now. As you said, it's all coming, it's here, we're in it. How do we navigate through it? What does that look like? Is a myriad space for storytelling. And so that's what we look for. Stories that are funny and engaging and entertaining and moving and will make you laugh or cry. What a good story, basically.
Yeah. And have you got any examples that you can draw on? Because you mentioned funny there. And I always think about how satire is such an important tool, but there's also a risk that it can go too far or that people can be offended. So how does that work? And is there any examples you can tell the audience?
Well, we have a project we're working on, which is a comedy, a romantic comedy, a rom-com, British rom-com. And it's a love story, as a rom-com is, a love story. And another example is After the Floods, an ITV drama that is, the series 2 is out at the moment. And that's a murder mystery procedural story. It's about a little town in Yorkshire being flooded by increasingly flooded by climate impacts. And it's a story of what happens to that community and how they, importantly, not just the impacts of flooding, but also how they grapple with what it means for them, who's responsible for that, how do they respond to it. And that was extremely popular. I mean, I think the first year it came out, it was 2024, wasn't it? 2024, maybe even end of 23. It was just after the Post Office drama, and it was the most popular, after the Post Office, it was the most popular show on TV that year. So, it's just great storytelling, basically.
That before, is it before or after the flood?
Before the flood,
after the flood. That's obviously kind of more obviously a story about resilience, it sounds, because it's about kind of a community and how they're adapting to clear climate impacts in their area. Yes. So that would be more of an explicit story, would you say?
I think so, but even that, it wasn't marketed as a climate story, not just because, maybe no one would watch it. There's probably some truth in that. I mean, I work on climate change and probably don't want to watch a climate TV show at the end of the day. You want to watch great stories, right? But also because it was a murder mystery story at its heart. That's how it was sold, and that's, that is what it is. Yeah. So although you're right, the kind of premise and the inciting drama was the flood and their body is washed up, as you have to. It was ultimately a good drama. I mean, another one that people may have watched is Under Salt Marsh, Sky.
And I think Catherine's worked on that. Catherine, you were involved with that at BAFTA, weren't you?
Well, we weren't directly involved with it, but they. My point earlier when we were talking was about how it is a great story because it's a detective drama. It's the first. I think it's the first town in Wales that's set to be taken over by the sea. So it will be lost to the sea, and it just shows how you can sort of have a climate story within this other story, and it's ever present. It adds to kind of the tension. It adds to the drama. You know, the evidence is about to get washed away, and it raised awareness for these really precious salt marshes in Wales and their really unique ecosystems that need to be protected.
Yeah.
And I think it reflects kind of what Lucy was saying with After the Flood as well. It just shows this creative opportunity of some of these incidents that are obviously getting more present, unfortunately, but it's about reflecting the reality of what we're seeing in the world on screen, and in our world, like local to us in the UK. You know, it's here. It's not talking about polar bears anymore, you know. So we need to reflect that on screen. Yeah.
Absolutely. And tell us a bit more about what you do at Albert, just for people who don't know in the room, because what I think is really interesting about Albert is that as BAFTA's sustainability platform, you kind of balance both the operational side of production, so how we can make the production of shows greener, decarbonize that, but then also the content and you know, working with script writers and weaving kind of climate into culture. So Albert, is that right? They're the two strands that you work on.
Yes, so the Albert is 15 this year, the tricky teenage years. We have been working on that time mainly at decarbonising production and running sustainable initiatives for behind the scenes. So how do you make it more sustainable? How do you obviously decarbonise it? And probably, I think about 5 years ago, there was awareness of kind of this, I think probably at the same time of a lot of this work was coming to the fore, was this awareness of the kind of the brain print and the power of storytelling to shift perceptions, shift behaviours, and shift our understanding of what climate change means, what the solutions are, what they could be, and kind of the future that we could start imagining. And so we have started to work with the industry. We work with and for the TV and film industry to sort of run initiatives. And we're sort of several steps back because we don't get that involved in the actual production, so we don't consult on a production, but we offer training and workshops and try to drive leadership initiatives. So the Climate Content Pledge was signed 5 years ago to get leaders across the broadcasters and streamers to commit to telling these stories across all genres. So it's not about a documentary about climate change, it's about a storyline in EastEnders and a comedy and you know, the whole gambit.
And of course we need all these things, don't we? We need the documentaries, we need David Attenborough's Ocean, but we also need comedy, we also need drama. Anyone who works in commissioning knows that, you know, especially with streaming now, people just need more and more content. And it's so great when we can have this angle kind of woven in. Stacey, I know that you've got kind of a lot, I was going to say decades, I think, of experience, you know, in script writing.
I'm 67 years old.
You look great.
I will be
Decades and decades. What works and what doesn't? Let's focus on the fiction side for a moment. What works for mass audiences when you're writing, in your experience?
I mean, it's hard to say there's one thing because we're trying to engage so many different types of audiences. I mean, I think the one thing that we have learned, there's been some like behavioral research on climate storytelling behind the scenes on different shows and things, and the one thing that always seems to ring true is that any sort of emotional reaction that people get from a story is they're more likely to take action after that. So if they're bored, they're not going to do much, which is pretty obvious, but I think it's important to say because I think that is why, you're seeing more comedy climate things. You're seeing more, kind of when you're talking after the flood with families and what they're dealing with, just more emotional stories. I think it just resonates more with people. But it's also, you know, it can also be things that are maybe, I mean, we had this on the main film and TV side, we had this film called Thrash that came out on Netflix last month. And it was basically about ocean waters are warming, and so sharks are going to weird places. But at the end of the day, it's just a shark movie, like a bunch of shark attacks. And, you know, and there's a pregnant woman who's trying to get away because there's a hurricane coming, you know, there's all kinds of stuff. But like that in itself, it's an action film, and we're trying to bring people in with a really fun story, and then they happen to watch it and learn like, oh, I didn't know that ocean waters, like that affects me directly when you realize, you know. So I think it's more about kind of picking all the different stories and seeing what, you know, how it speaks to you personally, you know? Because I think we're always going to be bobbing and weaving to what audiences may want or what studios want and things like that. But at the end of the day, it has to be a good story that you like and that that you're passionate about for it to kind of move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say is the difference between kind of the US and Europe and the UK in terms of reception to...
Oh gosh, you guys are way ahead of us. I mean, I was just thinking about, well, I mean, when you were talking also about that show and you're like, you know, the solutions and the steps we need to do, I mean, we're still in the stage in the US of like, guys, this is actually happening. You know, so there's a lot of like some of the things that we do, it's really more about just bringing the stories of like, no, climate change is here now and there are things and it's affecting people in every way. But, you know, I also think that, you know, there's a lot of bridges though of how, you know, we're all trying to kind of speak to different audiences and things like that. I just think we have a bigger hurdle a little bit of where we're meeting people, like where people are at currently.
Yeah, as a result of the political situation.
Exactly,
yeah.
Yes, the political situation of our president. But I think, you know, it's also forced us to be more creative at times because, you know, as you may or may not know, you know, one of the big things that Trump did was he banned words like climate change and feminism and diversity for government, like for entities that were getting government funding, which is a lot of the nonprofit world in the US. But I think what it made it for us is we were like, okay, so if we're not, I mean, we technically can say climate, but even doing that exercise of like, let's not say climate and see how we get people, you know, we say the economy, we say health, we say weather, like there are ways to talk about climate without actually saying the word. Mm-hmm. And so I think that has actually allowed us, I mean, he kind of helped us. He allowed us to speak to a different audience because we were like being creative with the language we use.
Mm. It reminds me of this phrase that, you know, we've said for years of kind of dark green audiences and light green audiences. Dark green being kind of, I'm already on board. Yeah, I'm going to watch anything environmental because I'm a dark green consumer. Light green kind of like, you know, more willing to engage if it's implicit rather than
right at you. Yes.
People who are worried about being preached at.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's like such an American thing too. It's like we don't want to be told what to do. You know, we're like freedom. You know, like there's something about I think American audiences where it almost needs to be. You need to sneak it in a little bit at times to get them to actually pay attention.
And Lucy, you know, for you, who do you think kind of holds the power in this industry nowadays?
Besides you.
Besides us, yeah.
Right.
I mean, obviously commissioners. I mean, what's interesting is, I mean, as you said, what rings true for audience also rings true for the commissioners and, you know, anyone green-lighting shows or financing shows is that, you know, in a way, always talking about climate. I mean, you're right, there's a silence on climate which is unhelpful when it becomes, you know, a sort of taboo to talk about it. But by keeping on talking about the problem of climate without talking about resilience, solutions, what does it mean for us, is also unhelpful, actually. It's unhelpful. It's kind of the own goal of the climate movement, that it keeps trying to raise awareness of the issue, get people to care about climate, when actually, I would argue, we kind of don't need that anymore. Like we don't need that. Maybe that's a controversial thing to say, but what we really need to get engagement in and support in, as you said, is like, what does it make us feel? What do we have to do? And not just individually, but as a society. So this is a long way around of answering your question. So who makes the decisions? You know, still commissioners. And we know that, I mean, at Netflix themselves, they talk about how some of their best performing titles are their sustainability titles, you know.
And what is a sustainability title?
Well, it's everything from Don't Look Up, I think, still one of the biggest
and
grossing
even Thrash,
movies.
the shark movie, was #1 for 2 weeks.
To the rom-com, the Christmas rom-com.
With Alicia Silverstone, that I can't remember the name of.
Yeah.
That one.
I mean, like, they have hundreds of titles from across unscripted, reality TV, films, TV drama, from the really subtle light green to the dark green, everything in between, and they are the best performing titles. So actually commissioners are starting to see this and realise there's an unmet audience demand there. Audiences are talking about, after Albert, you guys did some research on that, this is what people are wanting.
Yeah.
And so, yes, they still have the power, and then the other bit is talent, right? And talent are increasingly, whether it's writers or actors, are increasingly saying, this is like my issue, I care about this, this is what I want to be talking about, this is what I want to be working on. And all of that is helping kind of unlock some of that decision making, I think.
Yeah, I think talent's an interesting one. Come back to that in a minute, put a pin in that. You just made me think, I always think reality TV is a missed opportunity. Is anyone going to admit that they've watched Selling Sunset? Okay, great. Thank you for not letting me be alone. Amazing. Okay, I'm quite ashamed because it's awful reality TV, but it's also great. If you need to just switch off. And if anyone remembers in the last series, there's a whole episode where all of the realtors who go around looking at the $1 million mansions around LA can't leave their houses because there's so much rain, and it was when LA had that deluge of torrential rain. And I just remember watching it and thinking, God, if there was just one really subtle just mention here of climate change, look at that audience that you would reach, right?
We are working on some reality TV.
Oh, Selling Sunset?
Yes, coming soon.
Okay.
Not Selling Sunset.
Okay, coming soon.
Dating shows, all I'm going to say.
Dating shows.
But also, I mean, Clarkson's Farm. Who would have thought Jeremy Clarkson would become, spokesperson for regenerative agriculture?
Yeah.
Never thought that would happen in my lifetime. So,
No.
there you go.
No.
Reality TV, definitely.
Yeah.
That's what you're coming for. You're coming for the entertainment. Right?
And I think reality TV is probably the biggest genre on Netflix right now. When you look at the top performing shows. And just coming back to talent, Catherine, I'm just thinking about a conversation we had before, because I know that in commissioning, talent is what gets you in, isn't it? At the end of the day, you can have an amazing story, but if you have talent on board, like Jennifer Lawrence doing Don't Look Up and things like that, it just skyrockets the story to the whole world. You were telling me a good story about an actor recently.
Yeah, so one of the programs that we're developing at the moment is with impact production. So an impact producer would work with a brilliant film or TV show and take the social issue that's in it and try and drive real world change off the back of it. So it would be connecting up with campaigners or non-profit organisations or people that are trying to drive policy. There's loads of examples that you could pull out in the last year that would be ripe for kind of a campaign like that. Adolescents, I swear, don't look up. No, there was one. So we're sort of building awareness within the industry of that role and the power that it can do. And we know that talent actually, or we have case studies of talent that are particularly interested in working in films that then have an impact campaign off the back of them because they want to know that the film they're doing is going to drive some good in the world. So Dark Waters was a true story. Think Film ran the impact campaign for it. It was about the environmental pollution from DuPont true, but DuPont in America, who were basically putting chemicals into the water and killing off livestock and people and obviously polluting the waterway. It was because of forever chemicals, PFAS, yeah, PFAs, and they are allowed, or they were allowed, and actually the campaign that was off the back of this film was Mark Ruffalo going to the EU Parliament and petitioning for this chemical to be banned. They banned it. It also got banned from 120 companies, including IKEA and terrifyingly McDonald's.
Wow.
I'm not sure where it is there.
Where are those chemicals in our burgers?
Yeah, well, I imagine it's sort of it's a waterproofing chemical, so it's probably in the pans, I imagine. But yes, and he's since said that he wants to work in films that have these kind of social issues in them because he was so kind of I think, initially terrified and then delighted. I mean, I'm speaking on his behalf, but terrified initially and then delighted that he was driving change. So I think there's a real opportunity with that.
The thing with talent that I find is that celebrities don't want to speak out on this because they're so worried of accusations of hypocrisy. If they kind of stand up for anything to do with climate, they're worried they're going to be papped with a plastic water bottle the next week, or they have to fly to the next tour, and it stops them from speaking out at all. When, in my opinion, you know, we're all imperfect environmentalists in a way, and it shouldn't stop us kind of talking. But this impact producer, do you guys, you know, have experience of that? Because I think this idea is so interesting, of having a specific impact producer on a show to drive impact of whatever the story is in the real world.
Yeah.
You go.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, I think we definitely did it on Don't Look Up, and the way it was pitched to make them excited is it's just marketing for the movie. It's about making the movie successful at the end of the day, and it was, you know, being able to pinpoint which actors would feel comfortable about talking about it, how they'd feel comfortable talking about it. You know, and we did it on Thrash too, the shark movie. You know, there was a huge conversation of kind of what way in we were going to take, and because Don't Look Up was so successful with the marketing campaign around climate, they came in with like a pretty aggressive climate conversation for talent to do, where I think, and maybe at other studios or things where they don't have a sustainability department that is as far along, I guess, they were able to like really have some interesting conversations. And then I think it's just another voice to have out there to get people to watch Eyes on the Film. Like, so there's a lot of benefits besides helping people too, which you mentioned.
Yes, but as someone said earlier, the moral argument doesn't go that far anymore. You've got to tell people you're going to make money from this, you're going to do this.
Which is terribly sad, but it is interesting like how that flipped. I mean, I was even watching a show last night, Tiptoe. I think it's a new Russell Davies show. And I was watching it here last night, and it's interesting, you guys have like a little, you know, if you're feeling, you know, influenced by this show, by some of the subject matter, it's like very vague, but then it's like, go to this website for, you know, gay rights or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that idea even I think is such a subtle, simple thing. We don't do that, but over here I saw it a couple times, and I think like, I just think there's different ways in that gets people engaging from different directions, you know, when you do things like that.
In a way, the beauty of impact campaigning is obviously quite well established in the documentary space, you know, because quite often documentaries, single issue,
have a point.
It is a campaign, you know. Often the documentary filmmakers are making it as a campaign, and so it's often, you know, deeply kind of embedded in the project. I think, as you said, you know, in drama, particularly in scripted, the power is in the story anyway, but then also the impact campaign is in the broadest sense of the talent talking to their fans, you know, being given cover to talk about that, the kind of cultural conversation it sparks. You know, there's a whole kind of ecosystem of ways in which a story can have an impact beyond a specific call to action. I think that's the power.
And I was thinking earlier that the idea of employing a specific impact producer alongside the other producers, it's a bit like how people seem to be hiring intimacy coordinators a lot at the moment, which is so important. If you have a sex scene in a movie, you need someone to be managing that and thinking about that, whereas the film industry didn't even think about that before. It's almost like that, but for impact. And I hope that really spreads across the industry. So we've got another kind of 7 minutes. I just wanted to talk about this word resilience and maybe broaden it across to the rest of the arts as well as on screen. Where do you, and all the creative mediums really, not just the arts, journalism included. Selfishly, you know, I'll take any feedback from you all on how the news could be more creative, which is many ways. Where do you think we're at in the world right now in terms of the arts? And the power that we have to influence, and how can that spark this feeling of resilience? What does that mean to all three of you?
Just going to
Lucy, do you want to start?
Shall I go first?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really big question to end on, isn't it? I mean, the media space is going through quite a moment right now, isn't it? You know, it's a kind of upending happening. I mean, in a way, maybe that's no coincidence. You know, we are going through an extraordinary period of transition at the moment across every sector. And in that, you both get the kind of doubling down on the kind of commercial entertainment kind of juggernaut of media, but you also get the kind of pioneer independent arts kind of flourishing. And that's what you always have in a time of change. You have the kind of pioneers, creatives who are ahead of the curve, ahead of everybody else, and kind of pulling society along. And I think that's where we are. And resilience, when we're feeling buffeted by, the many crises that we're feeling at the moment, resilience is both a kind of artistic practice, it's a kind of collective practice, isn't it? And I think, that's only just going to show up more and more, partly out of necessity, but partly out of what we feel drawn to in times of challenge, I think. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just how people get their information now, it's like, yes, some people are watching the news, reading the news, some people are on TikTok, it's like, we're very fractured in terms of where we're getting things, but I think, looking at different ways into different audiences, we have a project on our short form digital side called Headline Nudes. And it's a project we did with a bunch of OnlyFans creators. But I bring it up because it's all safe for work. Don't worry, no one's naked. But it's basically just the idea of climate stories or news or things that are topical around climate. And the vehicle is a pretty lady who has an audience of a bunch of young men, which is a audience that we have not really tapped into totally, at least on the US side. And so it's something that is very fun because we're able to, I think, there's this whole other group of people that maybe aren't watching traditional news and things like that. And for them to watch a 90-second video where some pretty girl explains 1.5C to them, that's a huge step, So I think it's just about kind of flipping some of the ways that we've traditionally had media out there on its head a little,
Super interesting. If you go away with one thing today, it's that you can get climate from OnlyFans, you can see it in a rom-com, you can see it in a murder mystery. It's literally everywhere in the arts, and I think that's what makes it so cool and so far-reaching as a genre. But Catherine, tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and actually, sometimes it feels like you've already told the story, or you've reached the audiences, and actually there's so many more stories to tell, and there's so many more audiences to reach, and OnlyFans is one of them. But I think it's important to remember that. We often talk at BAFTA, but we've always used the phrase of radical collaboration, and I think the arts are very good at this, at kind of working together, but but challenging the status quo or trying to do something differently. And, I think if the arts can continue to work together to continue the resilience against, and drive climate action, then I think so
resilience within the arts as well. Yeah, I love that. And last question, what stories are we not telling? What stories are there still left to tell in the climate movement that you think that you just, you don't see enough, you don't see out there enough? For example, it could be we're doing a lot on climate, but are we doing enough on biodiversity? I mean, can we get kind of animals in a dating show?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing, and there's a little bit of this, I guess, starting, but just envisioning the world that we could have if we figure everything out. We haven't I think there's some shows that have dabbled in it, but sometimes they become too sci-fi or too out there, but real shows that would be taking place in 10, 15 years that are okay, we've got clean energy, we have figured out the food system and how to use regenerative farming and things like that. It would just be really cool to see that told in a way with also your, it could be a Friends sitcom, but it could be, with all of those elements around it. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, you just stole my answer. That's
I'm sorry. Just say it with a cuter accent.
That's a good thing. No, I agree. This is the area we're focusing the most on. The world building challenge, right? It's, close your eyes and try and imagine the world in 10 years' time where we've won on climate. And it is really hard to do, right? All you can think of is maybe some solar panels, maybe some reusable coffee cups, without, maybe there's an electric car, but that feels pretty lame, doesn't it? And we know that actually at the moment we're going through quite extraordinary revolution in, cost of solar plummeting, regenerative agriculture. And, you know, throughout history, that is how we win. That is how those dreams become reality. You have to manifest them first. You have to manifest them and then they'll happen. And I think that's the biggest gap that we have. But it's also creatively the most exciting space because it can be literally any story, you know, set in that.
It's kind of the opposite of a dystopia, like a utopia. Is it a utopia?
Protopia is a term that, you know, some people use. Protopia as in space between dystopia and utopia.
So a more realistic future rather than an idyllic, perfect one.
Or through-topia. We're going to get through it.
Okay,
It's
so
gonna
many
be difficult.
topias.
So many topias. Yeah.
I love that. Well,
Sorry, I didn't.
No,
know if you were coming to
Catherine,
me.
please.
I was going to say it's a very difficult one to come after. Aside from that, I do think there's lots of stories about justice and health that are still to be told. You know, I think there's a huge inequality about who's being affected, and I do think there's, you know, I mean, it might be that I'm perpetually obsessed with Erin Brockovich and I can watch it all day long, but, you know, I think it's a very rich story to tell on screen, and I do think there's a huge I saw a podcast once. I did actually, because they did film it, but they said litigation is going to save us, which I'm not sure kind of how to take that, but I do think there is something in kind of law coming for the people that are kind of all the corporations that aren't looking after nature or climate.
Yes, and as you say, the real world impact, plug for Dirty Business on Channel 4 if you haven't seen that. Amazing drama that just came out about the water bosses, the privatised water companies polluting the UK waters with sewage. But it's a drama with some amazing actors, and I think that's a really good another example of a real story put into fiction that then had a real world effect, as so many. And very, very lastly, have you got one recommendation that everyone should watch?
I just watched, and maybe you guys know this, but it just made it over to the US, but the Danish show Families Like Ours on Netflix. A lot of the similar themes we were talking about, families and having to migrate, but it's a similar thing. It's, you know, a flood is approaching and they basically have to move everyone out of the country, and it's just how it affects everyone and displacement and things. And but I'm making it sound more depressing than it is. I mean, it's depressing, but it's very entertaining. It's very good stuff.
Families Like Ours.
Families Like Ours,
I think it's on BBC iPlayer, isn't it? Yeah.
What she said.
Okay, Lucy?
I'm going to cheat and say something to read. Can I do that?
You can.
Because
you can.
we've talked about all that. I think I've given all the examples of TV. You can read the shortlisted climate fiction books. So there's some amazing books. So this is books that have been selected, that have been published in the UK in the last year, and they are kind of across all genres. So there's something for everyone there.
Yeah. A Beautiful World is one of them. That's the one I've read. A Beautiful World, that's my recommendation for climate fiction. And Catherine, any recommendation?
Yes, am I allowed to say two?
Yes?
I was going to say Under Salt Marsh, if you haven't watched it, from Sky. It's brilliant. And This is a Gardening Show, which is on Netflix, which is with a comedian who's trying to grow vegetables, but it's fabulous and gets in kind of what we're facing with food security and food insecurity, but it's very funny, so it's definitely worth a watch.
Great. We love funny. Thank you so much. Please give a massive round of applause to my panel.